What a privilege today I have to be with my friend. And I don't know that I've seen you since you've been married. So for me, Anny Haviland, but it's Anny Johnson now. But anyway, Anny is with me at this podcast headquarters. And I normally start with this word and this phrase, but I just need to riff on this a little bit. To just get you here at this hangar without hundreds of people around is such a treat.
Yeah.
It seems like every time, and it's not a criticism or anything, it's just your life. But I can only remember 4 or 5 times maybe, and all the time I've known you, that I get to sit down with you for like a lunch or a cup of coffee. And even then, it better be in a pretty out of the way place because we're going to get interrupted because it's you. And people come up, they go, oh, I don't want to interrupt, but hi, Anny. And it's kind of like you're the person you can't take anywhere, and people know you everywhere. And so to have you in these walls, in my space with doors locked, and here we are, what a treat.
Thank you.
I mean, for you to take the time to drive here and be here to let me kind of peel back the Anny that I know for people to see is a real treat. So thank you for being here.
That means
sincerely,
a lot.
It's huge. You're pulled in 1,000 directions. I know you are. So I really feel privileged. Thank you. The word or phrase in this case that I've chosen is a word that I think it's come out of a book that was written fairly recently, but it's a word that just fits you, the go giver, because there's 2 things that you do. You go, and boy, do you go. And 2, you are a giver. You're just known that's you.
Yes.
You're a giver. You're a giver on a quiet, under the radar way, and then you're a giver that will fill a ballroom with your energy because we've got a cause that needs giving.
Yes.
All right. So, Anny, I want to try to track this down. Because I'm of the philosophy that when something so extraordinary blooms for all to see, I get really curious. What formed that? And it's not always what people think.
Yes, that's true.
What formed it? So we're going to dig a little bit.
Okay.
And I have seen you in front of a room that I was hosting with hundreds of people in Las Vegas, telling a bit of your story up front. So I'm excited to do it again here in a sense, but I want you to take us way back to Anny's childhood and give me a picture of the you and the setting and some of the things that formed you. Can we just go right there?
Yes, absolutely. And you know what's interesting? I want to back up for 1 second. You mentioned the word go-giver.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating to me because in my life, and I take that as such a compliment, but I've actually never read, there's a book about it, and I've actually never read the book, but I have so many different copies of it because people give it to me all the time.
Yeah.
And they say, you have to read this. This is you. This was written for you. And I still get today. So I think now that you bring up that word again, it's almost like that reminder to me, this is a message that's important that you need to go check out. So I'm probably going to go back tonight, and I'm probably going to go find one of the copies, and I'm going to go read it because I hear it's amazing.
Well, and I think that anybody that has handed you that book, that has read it, says, who do I know that does this?
Yeah.
Well, it's you. Who do I know that lives this kind of way? But back to this philosophy.
Yeah.
I believe that the most extraordinary people have been formed through sometimes the most unusual ways.
Yeah.
And when I thought about the word, I thought about both those things. I thought about, well, this is you, there's no question. But I also know, and it's your story to share, but the ingredients that forms extraordinary, that recipe sometimes can shock you.
Yes, yes.
So talk to me about the young Anny,
young Anny. Okay.
and bring me out of that into adulthood. I want to hear about that.
Well, I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and my parents divorced. I think I was probably about the age of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom lived in Washington. My dad and his family were in Michigan. So completely across the U.S. from each other. And, I was such a daddy's girl. Like, my father and I have identical personalities. I am just a person of him, And then I have a lot of my mom, too. I have a lot of her heart. But at that time, I just couldn't fathom being away from him. So my younger sister, Katie, and I went to go live with my dad in Michigan. And my older sister, Stacy, stayed with my mom in Washington. And, I didn't really understand the lifestyle that we lived, but to me, it was normal. At first, I was very embarrassed about it, and I was really afraid to tell people my story and how I lived. I think it's because I lived a life where if they found out, then I could be taken away. And that was terrifying to me. Mm-hmm. But then recently I realized it's okay to go through those things because not everybody's perfect and not everybody has this perfect family and lifestyle, that it just makes you actually more human and allows other people to feel it's okay too. So when I grew up as a little girl, we lived in a motorhome, and it wasn't this big fancy motorhome. It was just a basic motorhome, and we would go from Kmart parking lots just to find electricity to hook up so we would have heat. And then we'd get dropped off at school, and then we'd find another parking lot, and at that age too, it's really difficult because you want to have friends and you want to invite your friends to come over and play after school, but where do you go do that? What if someone finds out and they're going to take me away? So it was always a constant battle. And we would get to do things like, oh yeah, you want to come in our motorhome and we can go to the roller skating rink or something. They just thought that was fun, but they didn't know when they got dropped off that the kitchen table that they were sitting at would turn into bunk beds that my dad made for us, and that's where we would sleep. Mm-hmm. So the seats would go down, and then there would be the bunk bed on top, and me and my sister would sleep on one or the other, and then we'd hide it and fold it back up, and you would never know it's there. Mm-hmm. So I think it was probably about that time in my life that I realized I suffered really severely with anxiety. Mm-hmm. It was pretty bad, and I think it progressed later in my life as well. But, I think I was always so afraid I was going to be taken away, and that was my security, that I just would cling to my dad. And I would constantly be so afraid to be away from him that I would literally go into the nurse's office all the time and say I was sick so he would come get me. But that was really hard for him because, being a single father at that time, he's doing everything he can to make a living and being constantly pulled, what does he do? And I remember the stress that it would cause him. Mm-hmm. And that was really traumatizing, but that's how we lived and that's how I grew up my everyday. And, but I think the part that was really traumatizing though for me is, coming home the one day I would run to the motorhome, the sink would be a snack drawer. I'd run in, I'd grab my snacks, and he was dating a lady at that time, but we didn't live in the house. She and her son lived in the house, but we were allowed to go in, but we didn't have rooms or anything like that there. But I remember running in to go tell my dad about the day, and it was different. There was something wrong in the air. And I just remember knowing that something happened to him. And I remember running down the field to the tennis courts, and I just remember screaming and crying, and I lost my dad. So my dad, yeah.
How old were you?
I was 2 weeks before my 13th birthday. And it's weird to think still as an adult, the relationships that you have with your parents will stick with you for a lifetime. Nobody's going to love you more. Mm-hmm. But you realize too, I think my biggest fear in life now is if something were to happen to me, because I have a son. Mm-hmm. And I don't want him to feel that pain. But I remember at that point, I think my whole life kind of switched. My mom came across the U.S. and drove to come and get us. And we had his funeral there. And then we drove back, and I spent my 13th birthday in a car with my mom and my sisters right after my father's funeral. And I came to Washington. And it was right, that's a tough time for a teenager, to go through. Because I was put into this school that everybody had known each other since they've been little kids. They all were raised together. They all came from wealthy families. They all were athletic, and so I felt like growing up, I felt like I never really quite fit in. Mm-hmm. And so, school assemblies were always traumatizing for me. Like, who am I going to sit with? Who isn't he going to want? But are you going to want to sit with me? Can I sit with the cool kids? Do I look like a cool kid? Will they even talk to me? So I remember later, through my high school years, I noticed, I don't know how it happened, but I never really had that click, right? Mm-hmm. I kind of was that girl that just made friends with all of them and never really fit into just one of them. Mm-hmm. And then I also noticed it wasn't just my school. I noticed that my friends became friends from all the schools. Mm-hmm. I would go hang out with kids from totally different school districts, and those were just my friends. And then my personality kind of started coming out. But my anxiety was still there. And that, I think, is what held me back my whole life. So I had this personality that was very similar to my father, that was very outgoing and charismatic once I established my confidence. But I had this anxiety and panic attacks that were so extreme. I actually went into a full-blown seizure at one point, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, to think of, like, people like, oh, but you're so natural at this. And it's like, I had to get myself to a point where I had to force myself past that because it held me back. And I think when you come from like nothing, you push so hard to have anything or something. So I kind of lost my whole life in balance. Like I was so afraid because I had nobody to fall back on. My mom was a single mom and she was a hairdresser, and now she has 3 girls that she has to take care of, and she could hardly make ends meet. And so, if I fell, if I hurt, if I went back, I had no one to call on to push me back up. A lot of times, people nowadays, you can call a friend or you call a parent and they're like, oh, shoot, you overdrew your account. Let me fix that. Do better next time. Well, if I was like, oh, shoot, I overdrew my account or something, there was nobody that could bail me out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what pushed me to have the drive that I have today. Mm-hmm. Because then the world was needed to watch out because I was coming. Mm-hmm. And I was going to find my way to whatever I had to do, however hard I had to work. When they told me I couldn't, or I was too young of a girl, whatever it was, I would prove them wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. So, at that point, I remember I was, I started working when I was 14 years old. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I got into the banking system. I worked at KeyBank. I got my Series 7 license. I think I was the first one selected that they put me through that program. I was always that girl that I would say I was street smarts. Mm-hmm. I applied towards a college just to prove to myself that I was smart enough. And I got accepted, and it was a pretty proud moment, but I never had the money to go. Mm-hmm. But I had the offer. Mm-hmm. And that was enough for me. Mm-hmm. So I just, I would even go up to Alaska and work in the fish canneries in the summers just to do anything, to be able to have a car, to get to work. And then I got myself so high up. I think when I left the banking system, I think I was ranked something like 7th top sales producer in the entire United States. Mm-hmm. And I was in my 20s. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they were like, who is this girl?
See, you're just so far, this is what I mean. It's like things are explainable if you dig in. Yeah. Extraordinary doesn't form itself casually.
Yeah.
It forms itself with extreme. Mm-hmm. It's extreme, extraordinary, but it forms itself with extreme. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes extreme adversity. Mm-hmm. Because there's a crossroads in extreme adversity. You navigate and overcome, or you don't. And it can go both ways. Mm-hmm. But you found a way. Mm-hmm. You found a way. And these types of things, Anny, I mean, losing the love of your life at 13 years old, oh my, cut it out. I mean, you wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Right.
But it's that defining moment. It's like, now what? Now what do you do? Tough enough up to then, but now what do you do?
Yeah.
And you found a gear, you found a depth, you found something. What was the something? What was it? What go back into your head space in that time? What was the conversation inside? Was it faith? Was it grit? Was it trying to prove somebody wrong that said you couldn't do it? Was it an influence, a friend that was there that said, you've got this? Do you remember what it was that got you going in one direction versus the other? Because this is the ultimate crossroads, right?
Yeah, well, first off, it started with fear. Fear pushed me. I was so afraid. Yeah. I was so anxious. Mm-hmm. But yes, there was a defining moment, and my career completely changed, and it's a very fascinating story, actually. My friend was trying to get me into the mortgage industry, and she kept telling me, you have it, you have it, you have it. You would be so good at this. But I was working for a bank where I had a salary, I had commission, I had medical insurance, dental insurance, vacation time off. Mm-hmm. And she wanted me to go into a 100% commission-based job.
Right, with no benefits.
With no benefits and no, you're going to figure it out. I know you're going to figure it out. And I'm like, that is terrifying. Mm-hmm. That is terrifying for me, because what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. And I remember back up one step though, I worked in this building that was downtown Bellingham. It was the old Bellingham National Bank. It was a historical building with glass windows all the way from up ceiling all the way to the floors, right? Mm-hmm. So you could see all the way, you see all the way around. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to fast forward again. All right, so I went home. I was married at that time. I went home to my husband, and I said, my friend is trying to convince me to get into this mortgage thing, and I want to do it. I want to do it so bad. I just feel like there's so much opportunity, but I'm too afraid. I can't do it. And he said, then we're going to pray about it. Okay, we're going to pray about it. He's like, no, we're going to ask for some serious signs. Mm-hmm. Like, Anny, you need to be hit over the head. You need to be kicked down. You need to have a sign that is such a sign that it was like, duh.
The Red Sea's got a part.
Right, because
here.
I'm always like, oh, well, maybe that was meant to be, or maybe that was supposed to happen, or maybe it's, no. He's like, you need a sign. Mm-hmm. Okay, so give her a sign that this is her path in life. Give her the okay that she can walk this. I walked into work the next day. I go into my office, and I look over, and I see someone walking from the front door to the teller station. And there's a long walk, right? And he had a gun. And he was about to rob us. He held up the bank, and I was terrified. And then he walked out, and you could see FBI agents, and the yellow tape and the doors get immediately locked. The reason I tell you about the building that I had worked in, because it was built in the 1800s and never had been robbed once in history. Because you would be able to see with all the windows, you could see what was happening. So anybody outside could see there is a man with a very large gun in that building right now, and they are getting robbed. And that's why the police and everybody came so fast, because people could see what's happening. I walked up to my boss. There was counselors in there. People were crying and screaming. And I said, thank you for all the opportunities you've given me. But if that is not my sign, I don't know what is. Here is my 2-week resignation. And I never looked back. Tell me that's not a sign. Because if that's not a sign, I don't know what is a sign.
Right.
So that's how I got into mortgage lending.
Well,
there we go.
And
let's go.
I want to start there, but I also want to end, because it's kind of something that you may not tell people. But when you say you got into mortgage lending, there's been a lot of people that have gotten into mortgage lending, but to have neighborhood mortgage is beyond well established after all these years, and to be in the top 0.5% of all mortgage people in the country is you. And so there's the end of the story. Talk to me about that transition. Now here you are, no more security, quote unquote. Well, no more robbers at your door. That's good, right? But benefits and all of the infrastructure of Key Bank, a big company, gone. Now here you are.
Now what, right?
Now what?
Now what?
What do you? Where do you start? What is your secret sauce? What's your go-to inside who you are, Anny? What's that secret sauce?
Knowledge. I have to learn everything, not just read it, understand it, and put it in my mind, right? That's why I think I make such a good lender. I will read a guideline like I'm an attorney. I read those keywords, the and, the or, the the little thing, and it's like I'm constantly putting together a case. And sometimes I get such a photographic memory with it too. Like I can start rehearsing guidelines to you. So, but I obsess over it. I love it. I don't like someone to say they can't do this if that's their dream and passion. And I feel like I'm constantly fighting for that. And so I get extra focused on that. I've got to find the way. And so I'm constantly educating myself. And education is like the number one key. It really is. And it takes experience to get that, unfortunately. Lending is by far not easy. I don't care if you've been in real estate, something similar, escrow, whatever. There is nothing quite like understanding lending because none of them speak to each other. And there's so many different programs and so many different banks, and they all have their own guidelines sometimes, and they all have their own overlays. It's a matter of understanding the basics to know how to navigate it. But I obsess over teaching myself because I don't think I'm the most extremely intelligent person, but I think I'm the most extremely intelligent taught person. Like I might not be perfect at my English. I might mess up my words, and that's okay. I'm human. Laugh with me, right? But I will find a way to figure it out. And I think that's what it takes. But
street smart.
Street smart. Yeah, that's what I tell people. I am street smart. I don't have this 4-year college degree. I did get my 2-year associates. I did that Running Start program. So when I was high school, I was working full time. I was doing Running Start, and I was going to high school. So I think I'm used to always multitasking because that's the only way I feel like I'm going to be able to get somewhere in life because nobody was able to give me anything to start off. I had no kickstart.
But at this point, now this lending gig that you've been on it for a long, long time. Right?
I think I'm 26 years now into it.
I'm going to say you're a
but I'm only
seasoned
27 years
veteran
old.
that's constantly growing and learning because the programs and opportunities and doors open and close and all of this is dynamic in this industry. I mean, literally weekly something's happening.
Yeah.
And so being up on it to see where the gap is, to see the opportunity in the change, You're right. Knowledge. You just have to be right on it.
Knowledge and relationships. I'll have to throw that in as well.
Well, so here's the left brain
Okay.
and the right brain, right? The right brain people skills.
Yeah.
And you said already that this is in part came a lot from your dad, and the heart came from your mom. We're going to get into that with a whole nother topic, right? But it is a left and right brain ability. It's the technical knowledge and understanding the overlays, like you said, the programs, the systems.
Yes.
But communicating, connecting, understanding people is a whole different side of the brain. And I think that this is the secret sauce, is that you have both of them in quantity. Talk to me about the right side of the brain. How do you, if you were to teach a class on connection, relationships, you have more than about anybody I know, and everybody considers you their best friend. How do you have hundreds and hundreds of best friends? It's you. You're the common denominator in that. So explain that.
I think it's just being a good person. I think I've really learned a lot of lessons in my life. And I've taken time to learn those things. I will not judge anybody. I live by kindness and gratitude. And I think so many people, I mean, we live in a world today that can be really ugly. And it's sad to me. It's heartbreaking, actually. There is a platform out there for people now to hide and just be mean and cruel and judge. I don't have that in me. I don't have that anywhere in the depths of my soul. I don't even know how to be mean to somebody. I think I hurt more if they felt hurt. I think they call us like an empath is what I get that a lot. It's where I feel people's emotions. So if I were to physically, mentally hurt you, I am going to probably break down into tears. I cannot do it. I will be traumatized. I don't even care if you're a bad person. If I feel you're hurting, I feel like there's got to be something good somewhere. I can't even fathom to have them hurt. I think sometimes people have the emotion of anger. I've learned a lot of emotions, and I can be very emotional in many areas, but the emotion of anger is I don't always recognize or know that emotion very well. And I think sometimes people get themselves in such a state of anger that they don't really care. But I don't get that anger piece. And I treat people like family, and then we're all equal. I really, truly want what's best for everybody. And I think what happens in life, people get to a point where they want you here, but then once you get here, they're kind of okay, but when you get here to them, they're no longer okay. But I want you to get here. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to understand and believe that's what I truly mean, but I truly mean that. And too many people, when you get above that, they just want to push you down. But I'm like the cheerleader. I think I'm just the naturally born cheerleader. I'm going to be the first person to give you a compliment and the last person to leave to give you another compliment. Because when you feel good, I feel good. And I don't know if that's what it is, but I think I just treat my friends are family to me.
I'm trying to do something that I'm not qualified to do, but it intrigues me that when I go back to that 5-year-old living in a motorhome who's afraid that somebody might judge you. That's afraid that somebody might think less of you because this is where you live. I don't know how to create those connections, but I have to believe there's a connection, a soldering, a wiring there somewhere that says, I don't want anybody to ever feel that anxiety that I had. In other words, your life and wherever it is fine with me.
Yeah.
is what you communicate. I don't have a judgment as to you and where your life's at, because I didn't want people to judge me for where I was at in my life. I didn't have any control over it. I was 5 years old. But remembering, I think that there's these triggers of anxiety that can cause you to act in ways you don't want to. I think there's triggers that can cause you to actually become incredibly empathetic, compassionate. Those words describe you completely. In everybody that, if you were to take 1,000 people, and that's not an exaggeration, that know you, that say they know you well, which is amazing, but I know that's true. Tell me about Anny. I would bet any amount of money that paragraph would have empathy and compassion in it. Well, where does that come from? It comes from a tough place, I think. I think it does.
Yeah.
I don't know how else you create that except to feel the risk of not receiving that.
Yeah. And I think that's actually probably my weakest trait is I still carry that. I still carry, I'm always still afraid of what other people think. And I don't quite yet know how to eliminate that still in my life. But it's something that's always right there. I wish I didn't have to feel that. I wish I didn't have to feel like I was constantly being judged. And it's hard not, like, I envy the person who just says, like, I don't care what they think. I don't care what they say.
Right.
My skin is thick for others, but when it comes to me, if I poke myself, I'm going to bleed real quick. And I think you're actually point on, Greg. Like, I think it's knowing what that feels like, and then also being an empath and feeling others. I don't ever want someone to feel hurt, to feel pain, to feel like they're not good enough, to feel like they're judged and they can't do it. That's just unbearing for me to imagine someone else feeling those things, even when my son is sad, like, it guts me. I don't want you to feel that. Like, I want you to just be so confident, and if you could just see yourself the way I see you, but unfortunately we don't all carry that, that other person's mirror.
Right.
So I think you're point on.
Well, and I hate to almost be making my point even further, but then to have lost your dad at this age where all of this self-consciousness is just accelerated. It's just crazy accelerated. It's like it's squared at that point. Now it's like double the reality. Yeah. And yet here's the net result. It's like, who would have thought that you, as people know you now, was formed in such challenge and adversity, and I think it's also extremely transparent and vulnerable, Anny, which is amazing, and it's your way. But to say that you still struggle with that, because it's so easy to look at you and, oh my God, here you are on TV again. Here you're this. Here's your that. You're beautiful. You're that someone like you, of course, would not struggle with the idea of what people think of you because you're so confident. You're so smart. And yet, this is where I think your transparency is also something that is a connector with people. They feel that you're just a human being, which is hard to grasp sometimes. You come across and can at a distance as being bigger than life. Like, you wouldn't have any problems. Right. You wouldn't have anything you struggle with. Right. And yet there's something written on my board right up there on that office, I promise you, is a quote that one of my kids' school teachers said. I don't think it's an original, but that's where I heard it. Everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
True.
And I wrote it on the board and I said, boy, do I agree with that.
True.
I don't care who you are. You're fighting a battle usually that nobody knows about.
Yep.
And I think that your vulnerability around that is also what draws people to you, that you're just real.
Thank you.
Yeah. Take me if you. I want to hear more about this company, because starting out and being a mortgage rep, well, that's kind of one thing, but building a company, like Neighborhood Mortgage, that truly has made a huge impact in the business world. That's a whole different undertaking than just being a kind of an independent rep here and there.
Yeah.
Right?
So how'd that all come about? So, well, yes, I was a wholesale lender. So I would go, and the lender that I would work for, we'd go to different mortgage companies and would, hope that they would send their loans to us so we can underwrite and fund them. So I got to see everything on acceleration, because a loan officer might have one there, here, but when you're a lender, you're getting them from all of them all over, and they come in fast, and you want to look through to help them figure out the guidelines and how it's going to fit into your program. But then I realized, coming from the banking world to the brokerage world and wholesaling on the brokerage side, that where was this? It was this or this and none of this. You either worked for the bank and
there's your products. That's what
there's
you
your
sell.
products,
Right.
and you're the good guy, but yet this is your only rate. And or you're a broker and you have lots of different products, but you could be looked at as a bad guy because you might, I don't even know what they were going to say. And there was no, well, what about if we took the loan products and all the options, but the stigma and the ethics, and we combine them as much as we can? How can we make a difference with that? And that's when Neighborhood Mortgage was started. So we started it from our kitchen table. And there was a gal that I used to work with at the bank, and she'd probably been there like, I don't know, 14 plus years, right? She was a go-getter. I would see her running up and down, just getting stuff done. I'm like, breathe, you're going to be fine. And she would take the deposits and run them and get them back over. Her service was like impeccable. And she had twins, and she was married, and, just making ends meet. And I remember I had quit after we got robbed and all that. And after the wholesale, and I was at our kitchen table. I hadn't even had our business license yet. We're just getting this all going and started. And she comes knocking at the door. I'm like, what are you doing? Is it your lunch break? And she's like, I quit today. I go, what? She's like, well, I realize you don't know how to feel in life. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to sit next to you and we're going to figure this out. I'm like, I don't have payroll. I don't have a business license even yet. I just have the concept, and I'm going to make this happen. And she's like, well, then I'm joining you.
I'm in.
I said, well, that's a lot of responsibility. Okay. She's still with us today.
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
That is awesome.
And the fact that she went and did that, she wasn't in a position to do that. I will never forget how someone like her believed in me enough to not even consult with me, to just go up and do it and come sit next to me like this.
Right.
Was eye-opening. And at that point, I think, is when I also realized I have the capability to help others. And I need to always remember to lead by example.
Yeah.
And that's how Neighborhood Mortgage was started.
Yeah. And still active and vibrant
Yes.
and as alive today as any great business should be, but not the only entrepreneurial thing that you do under the big umbrella. Talk to me about your passion and your expertise in the world of real estate brokerage as well. Why not? Let's wear that hat too.
Yeah, let's
right?
wear that hat too.
Right.
Well, and even before any of that happened, Kind TV started.
Oh, that's a whole separate topic. I want to stay on business and then come back to Kind TV, because
So that's going to be in the middle of the story then. So then if we want to fast forward to I have my real estate license now as well. I think that's new since we met last. And I think with being in lending, I naturally teach and train realtors anyways. Because when a file comes through, I need to help them structure it. I see what's winning deals. I see the negotiating from all different brokerages all over the place. And my husband is a realtor. I actually helped get him into that as well. So I was like, gosh, this is a great industry, real estate. He's always was so fascinated with it, and he ended up doing that and worked for a company and did well with it. And then, I was just being the supportive wife, right? Mm. And when he was gotten to a point where he was ready to make a change, guess what, Greg? I know people.
I happen to know the guy that started something called EXP. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I feel so fortunate because living in Bellingham, I feel like there's so much talent that comes from that place. Mm-hmm. It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But my next door neighbor, when I moved first to Bellingham, I became friends with her sister. And so I've probably known her since maybe I was like 15-ish years old. And her name is Debbie Byrie. Mm-hmm. And she was always like, just like that big sister role model to me. Mm-hmm. She was always a dear friend. She was always there for me no matter what. And then I knew this guy, Glenn Sanford. Mm-hmm. And, I've known Glenn for probably over 20 some years, and such an amazing person. But it's funny because I look back now and, at that time, let's go back many years, right? There's really not, cell phones are kind of coming out. There's this World Wide Web thing, like there's these computer stuff, but we're old school. We do business with a handshake and a business card, and you go network at the Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. That's how you do business. Mm-hmm. Introduce each other, right? Well, this Glenn guy would be like this SEO stuff. And I'm like, mm-hmm. What is SEO? I'm like, so weird. He's always into this internet thing, so different.
Right.
And he was always thinking like so futuristic that you couldn't even quite put your mind to it. It was so fascinating. But he was doing so well with it. And, as a lender at that time, and he was a realtor at the time, of course, we'd talk. We'd do lots of different things together, and we would pick each other's minds. But it was always so fascinating where he was going with it. Mm-hmm. So fast forward, so I've known them, and he started this thing eventually. This is even before he even had EXP. EXP hadn't even been born at that time yet. But then he created this brokerage, and he wanted to do that different thing too. Right. But at that time, the world wasn't quite understanding it yet. Mm-hmm. But he was like, what if there were not like brick and mortars everywhere? And the money instead went back to their agents, and then we become half agent owned, and then we utilize the World Wide Web and people from across the world with the intelligence, and everybody can kind of join in on it. And he created this foundation that was so forward thinking. I think in the very beginning, people were still like, what? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So knowing the kind of people that they are and knowing the kind of hearts, because that's huge to me. Like, first and foremost, are you a good person? Mm-hmm. Because if you're not a good person, then that's going to be a problem for me. Mm-hmm. But if you're a good person, there's a vision. And I was like, Jeremy, we need to go talk to somebody at EXP. So I'm just being the good wife. And then I'm like, how about I take you to their EXP con in Vegas, and I'll introduce you to them. They're like my really good friends. Like, I love them dearly. Great humans. And he's like, that would be great. So we go down there, and my eyes opened so wide. And I realized there was a totally another opportunity that I just completely missed and didn't quite understand. So, being in straight commission too, it's like, we don't always set aside pensions. You're a real estate agent, you're a lender, you get a commission check, and then you have to wait till the next check. There's no basic payroll typically.
Residual. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not everybody understands the finance aspect to understand, like, well, do you need to set aside enough money to be able to retire? Is there retirement? We forget that, right? And so the pattern and the model that they created, there was a way that you actually would receive revenue sharing. So it's basically like a profit of the company, even when you don't close. And when you attract and you help other agents, you all grow. The stock grows, you grow, you get awarded with all this. And even when you don't sell real estate. And that was so fascinating to me because I've never heard another brokerage doing something like that. Mm-hmm. And then that aha moment came on for me. It was like, well, what are we going to do when we retire? What if something happens to you, Jeremy? What if something happens to me? And then what? And then when do we be able to say, okay, we're done. We're going to work the rest of our lives. And we're like, we need to start a foundation now to put it in place to know that we can be okay later down the road. And I immediately went home. I got back. I signed up for my 90 clock hours. I got my fingerprints. I passed my test all in 10 days. I'm a maniac.
Right.
And I was so determined. And now, it's been about a year, and we formed 110 agents. And now we have a group of about 24 in our group. And we have agents in California and Texas and Arizona and all up and down Washington. Mm-hmm. And I'm not their team manager. I don't take their splits, but we all act together as a group and a team. And I figured out a true passion and a connection with it all. And I love seeing these agents grow to their potential of what they've always wanted to. And it's pretty fascinating and a huge blessing, I would say.
You can probably refer a pretty decent mortgage company to their business
and I know
too,
a
right?
really great lender too. Yeah, and that's what's great too. And so I can help them with that because I feel like I've seen everything. I don't actually write purchase and sale contracts. I try to stick with my area, and that is, lending. But I help lead the group, and I help. I mean, like I said before, I already been doing that for 20 plus years.
Right.
So I know what everything is. I know how to explain it and describe it to them in English because our industry is a foreign language.
It is.
It is absolutely a foreign language.
Yeah.
And
even the what most people would call the conventional side of the business is still a language unto its own.
It is.
There's layers of where you take it even further than that really becomes a foreign language. But I hear exactly what you're saying, that it is a knowledge base that very few people could pass a test.
Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned very quickly, you just flew by it like as a matter of fact, you got your Series 7 license.
Oh, yeah.
I wish somebody would just sort of pause there and go research that one. If you want to really, for a good time, go try to pass that test.
That was intense. I think that was like an 8-hour exam of all mathematical.
I took that test, and I'm telling you, it is brutal.
It is brutal.
And so it's the knowledge that you have. You're teaching a language to people that do this very rarely. Yeah. They might buy half a dozen properties in their entire life and go get a bank loan or any kind of loan. They're signing documents and notes and deeds of trust and things that they've never read before. It's a language.
It's intimidating.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
That's why you have to have, I think, almost a good nurturing and like a way to explain it where it makes sense. Like I really try to walk them through from the very beginning and explain in a way like this is what's the next thing that you need to focus on. Now this is what's happening. Here's your choices, and just really explain it to them in English. Because if you go in and say, well, these are your escrow accounts, and the simple word that might be that to us, and a simple thing as an escrow account means to someone else.
Right.
Like, what are you even saying?
Right.
So I back it up. And I really try to explain things to where it makes sense for them.
Yeah.
And make it not stressful. Yeah. Like I know what the underwriter is going to ask you for. I'm going to look at your stuff and I'm going to tell you they're going to want this, this, and this. So let's work on that ahead of time. So then when we go to underwriting, my clear to closes right now are probably like, I just did one a few weeks ago for 3 days. They don't even let me close in 3 days because there's a 7-day mandatory compliance wait. So I sit there and I just, okay, now we relax.
We tread water.
Wait. You got to wait. Yeah. That's even including appraisals, it's because awesome. I know what they're going to ask for, but I'm going to walk them through in the very beginning before they even start looking for a home.
Yeah. So so you have this foundation set up, and you tagged on another chapter here, which is so awesome, and I can't wait to at some point in life meet Jeremy. I know that there's a backstory to that in terms of that you've known him for a while with this other chapter we're going to cover, but just know that I'm looking forward to meeting him. But the business space that you have with the lending world, and now a really solid team being built in the real estate world. I want to switch brains.
Okay.
Now I want to go back to a different world.
Okay.
I want to enter the world of philanthropy.
Yes.
I want to enter the world of kind TV.
Yeah.
I want to enter the world of acting.
Yeah.
I want to go to that world of that side of Annie's world, back to as long as you can, to start connecting some of those dots and how that world, because I don't know what world knows you more. In other words, there's a world that, rock star lender Annie.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole nother world that it's the philanthropist Annie.
Yes.
And not that they don't all cross, but I want you to go to that world, and where did that come from, and walk me through that world, because to me this is I don't know, it represents this balance of life that I know a lot of hard driving business people that's I swear that's every drop of their life that's it. Mm-hmm. And I know those too that are just dedicated to nonprofits and philanthropy, and most people don't think that they can be in one person.
Right.
There, go.
Go. Yeah. It's so to say branding's hard for me. It is, because you're right. I do wear a lot of different hats. But I've tried to find a way to incorporate them all. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of cool because all of them are me in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. There's not one that completes me without the others. But, when I first started the production, the show, it was around 2007, 2008 when our market completely crashed. Mm-hmm. And me, with my sensitive heart, people were coming to me in tears, and they would say, I lost my job. Like, not, standard people that you would expect. Like, the world was coming to a crash. Mm-hmm. The market had crashed. People were going to lose their homes, and they were looking for the answer. And I didn't really quite know what to tell them. And then they would ask me even to go appear on talk shows and radio stations, and they want to hear what do we do? Mm-hmm. Because the media is telling me to walk away from my home and bail. Mm-hmm. And like, what do I do? Mm-hmm. The market value is going to go down, so just run while you can and just deal with it. Mm-hmm. I was like, gosh, that is a good answer. I'm like, well, why don't you turn to this oh no, there's nothing over there to watch. Okay, why don't you watch? No, there's nothing over there to watch. And I'm like, gosh, and I realized everything is so doom and gloom.
Negative everywhere.
So negative. Mm-hmm. And that is not my personality. And that was really hard for me. And then I figured there's nowhere to turn these people to. So I started saying one thing: stop reading the newspaper, turn off your TVs. Mm-hmm. That's all I could think of. Mm-hmm. But then the more I started thinking about it, there really isn't that outlet where people needed just a shot of sunshine. Mm-hmm. People just needed to have a smile on their face. Everybody was in the dumps. So that is when Talkative TV was blossomed. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting because having the personality of my father, he was a very outgoing, driven. I mean, it was like me with no anxiety or fear. Like, that man could walk into a room and he had charisma that was out of this world. My aunt always tells me your father should have been a talk show host. He was a David Letterman. He was a Jay Leno. Like, that was your father. But I had that, but I was behind a desk with numbers all the time and business savvy. And I didn't have an outlet also to let my personality out. You know, when you're a young girl and people are used to walking into a bank with an older, sophisticated man, that was a hard world for me to be in. You know, I would be at these award ceremonies and was the youngest one there by far. Mm-hmm. And people didn't take me serious, and that was really hard. So I always had to play a different role, you know, to prove to them I am intelligent enough that you want to work with me. I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to get the job done. But it was hard for them because of the judgment to get through that. So I'm like, what if I had this outlet where I could just share some positivity in the world? Because everybody is looking for it, but there's really nobody out there doing it. So I created Talk It Up TV, and you know, you'd go into my office, and I bet if you still go into the building today, you'd probably still find the holes where take down my painting, and then I would put up my green screen, and I had this little I don't even know what I think they're called, like a flip camera. It has a USB in it, and I had a little tripod, and then my mortgage assistant, she would have to come in there and videotape me. And then I would figure out how to edit on YouTube. No idea what I was doing. But there was nobody out there, Greg, at this time doing this, okay? I think it was me and Gary Vaynerchuk were about the two, that he understood vlogging and everybody else would blog. They would write. But then I realized we have more senses. You have the sense of seeing and hearing, you know, and you don't get that through reading. And this is, for me, terrifying. I need to point that out. This is terrifying to think there's going to be a camera in my face. I'm going to be judged and I'm going to black out. And what if I go into a seizure again from a panic attack? But I forced myself to do it because the world needed a better outlet. And I called it Talk It Up TV because I thought talk it up, like positive, bring it up. Let's uplift the world. So it started out so random, all over the place. It's embarrassing to watch some of them. But then there was a pivotal moment. And, you know, I always had the power of connection. You know, if I meet people here, if I could just give them opportunity to connect. And I thought, let's do that. And I met this little girl, her name was Maddie. And Maddie looked just like me when I was young. I had these crazy buck teeth, and they stuck out. I had to wear a headgear. I had braces. You know, that's what I looked like. And I met Maddie, and Maddie lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with her mom and her sister, and her little sister shared a room. But her mom was a seasonal worker, and so they didn't get insurance. They didn't get dental insurance. And this little girl would get bullied so bad. And my camera guy's like, you got to meet Maddie, Annie. You got to meet Maddie. She needs to know you. We got to help her. We got to bring this little girl's smile back. And I remember meeting her and just thinking, wow, I know a dentist that if I just told her story, why would he not want to help her?
Right.
Right? How could you not want to help this little girl? And this little girl says to me, you know, it's really hard at recess time. Nobody wants to play with me. And I said, well, I understand that. And she goes, I think she sensed my sadness for her because, like I said, I feel people. And she looked at me and she just looked across the room. She goes, Miss Annie, it's okay. I go, it is? And she goes, yeah. She goes, I figured out a solution. You did? Well, tell me about it, honey. And she's like, well, you just bring pencils with you everywhere you go, and especially recess. Pencils, huh? Why didn't I think of that one? I don't understand, Maddie. And she goes, oh, well, you turn them upside down and you create faces on the eraser. And then when you feel lonely and nobody wants to play with you, you turn your pencils upside down and you don't feel lonely. You feel like you're with somebody.
Yeah.
Right?
Now you're a bucket of tears. Now what?
I'm a bucket of tears. I go home, I find the dentist, and I remember how it made me feel. And I went home. We had built this beautiful home on 10 acres. This massive, gorgeous house. And like I told you before, like I kept pushing myself because I didn't know where my limit was. I didn't know how to stop. I was so afraid to fall backwards that I kept going in my career, pushing forward. And I got myself to a point, I think at that time in my career, I think I was ranked one of the top most successful financial individuals in the United States of America, which is weird. I was on that list with Ben Bernanke. He was his chief executive of the United States of America. I was on that list with one of the founders of Bank of America. And the list went on, and it blew. And then this young girl from Bellingham, Washington, that nobody really knew who they were. So I had pushed myself, and I went home, and I looked around, and I sat in my living room with very tall ceilings, and I said, what is this all for?
Yeah.
This means nothing. Means nothing. And that was a huge turning point in my life. And all within 1 year, we sold our house. I went through, I know it sounds crazy, but a very amicable, kind separation, divorce. And moved from Bellingham, because all I knew was a small town. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody's business. And there was one freeway, 2 lanes. That's it. And I packed up by myself, got a U-Haul, and I moved to Seattle, which has more than 2 lanes on a freeway, let me tell you. And there's a thing called traffic. It's scary. And my whole life completely changed. I took all the money and I created a foundation. Eventually ended up being turned into Kind TV is what we ended up naming it. And I turned it into a 501c3, which is a nonprofit organization. And I set aside lending for a little while. And I decided that I needed to take everything that I had earned and worked my whole life for, and I needed to give it back to those who needed it more than I did. And I found my inner passion and my purpose in my life. And it took a complete restructure and balance of my life to figure out where I needed to go. And I did this at a time that nobody was doing video. You know, there was nothing out there. And it was interesting, and I thought it was pretty cool too. But so many people come up to me. I always had this idea of a positive TV show, but there was nothing out there to really relate it to. And I started getting branding down in LA, and I would fly every 2 weeks to LA to get training on it because I don't have a clue what I am doing. I am awkward. I have anxiety. I am not very good with English. I'm terrified of a camera, but I have a heart and a purpose that needs to be shared. And I saw all these and celebrities out there, and I didn't see what they were doing good with their gift. And my agent down there kept telling me, Annie, they don't want this positive TV thing. It's boring. There's no shock factor. And I would say, you are wrong. They do. And she says, you're not Jersey Shores. You're not the Kardashians. That's what they want. So I got back on the plane and I said, well, what if you could create shock factor?
It makes me want to just throw up that we're choosing
that, right?
Jersey Shores and Kardashian over.
I know.
I've watched what you do, and you walk away with hope. You walk away feeling, I believe in the world again. I believe in
humanity.
people again. You know, I mean, versus this.
You feel like
I need to take a
garbage.
Shower. It's so nasty.
Yes,
yeah,
right? And that's what the networks were buying. That's all that they cared about. They weren't looking to fund these other things. So I got on the airplane, and then, there goes my mind again. My mind runs 1,000 miles per hour. And I had that aha moment. All right, well, who says shock factor has to be negative? Why does shock factor have to be negative? Right? There's a shock factor in the Extreme Home Makeover where they leave and they come back and they move that bus.
What about a little girl's teeth?
Yes, exactly. So I'm like, What if there's real life tragedy And normally everybody comes in and highlights the tragedy, but then they walk away.
Mm-hmm.
What if the community comes together and every single type of tragedy, we come up with a solution or a way to make it better as much as we can when they least expect it? Why can't that be shock? So that's what the foundation of Kind TV turned into. And then she said, build a brand, Anny, and prove them wrong. And I did.
Mm-hmm.
And they did come. And I ended up having volunteers from all over the place. People started watching it. I had a full board of directors. And we ended up on a basic network channel. And it gave us so much bandwidth that I was able to give more. And that really fulfilled me as a person. And then I realized the world also needed more role models, you know? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, I don't need this attention, but what if I could take this attention and I could turn it into something good? And I realized these little girls are watching me. These kids are watching me. They're wanting to know what I'm going to do. What's Anny going to say? What's her next act of kindness? Like, I would have parents write me and say, my daughter after school runs to the computer every day and she wants to see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And she will mimic you. Mm-hmm. I had this one other girl down in Idaho. She would even mimic everything I would wear. If I wore a fedora hat, she was getting a fedora hat. She actually even started a kindness group in her school. And she got all the kids to come together and they would have their act of kindness day and they would have to leave like little positive words of affirmation for the teachers, or they'd have to do something nice for the kids. And she started the whole kind crew for her school. And so I thought that's what I can do. I could take whatever special attention and I can help a different generation to leave that kindness in others, because the world doesn't have to be dead. And, you know, through that show, just doing it for that many years, I learned life lessons that are irreplaceable. You know, you mentioned earlier, you know, just being judged. And that is, you know, like we talked about, that is one of the hardest things for me, because people do come up to me a lot and they go, oh, what her rich daddy buy her that, or what, you know, like I get made fun of all the time, you know, even physical appearances. Even on my show, I'm there doing acts of kindness and people are going to make fun of my forehead or something. They'll make fun of the way I look. They'll say, oh, she's a 4 or 5 head or something, you know, and it hurts. Like, I'm a real person. It hurts. So I did an entire episode on, you know, how do we eliminate that? Because I don't care if you're a cheerleader and you get judged, or you're a motorcyclist and you get judged, or you just get judged because you're successful. Mm-hmm. Like, who do we have the right to judge somebody? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do a whole story on it. And Ryan Stiles from Whose Line Is It Anyways partnered up with me. And we did a thing with the Burn Children Recovery Foundation, your friend Michael.
Michael, yeah.
They made a difference in my life that is a story that I tell all the time. Because there was a little boy at his camp. So these are children that are burned from head to toe. And imagine what that's got to be like. And especially in that age, you're already going through self-confidence issues. Yeah. Now, how do you feel? How are you ever going to fit in? How are you ever going to feel confident enough? Because people judge you. And I was asking that question at this event that they had to this little kid. And he was probably right around a teenager, I would say 12, 13-ish. And he goes, well, I already know how you eliminate it. Well, you are a kid of intelligence, because most adults still, we cannot figure this one out. Mm-hmm. I said, well, how do you eliminate judgment? And he looks at me and he says, Anny, you have a story. And I bet your cameraman right there, I bet he has a story. And I know for sure those guys over there have a story. What if people just stopped assuming and they just asked? Simple. He's like, do you know how many people point at me and stare at me and laugh at me? I will tell them what happened to me if you just ask. You don't have to judge. You don't have to assume. Most people are okay telling their story.
Right.
But instead, people just make up your story for you and put it together, and they have no clue.
Right.
They have no clue what you've been through, just like you're saying up there.
Yeah. It builds off that same principle that if you think on that and you believe that, all of a sudden we're all the same.
Right.
And it may not seem that way visibly or from the outside, but that's really not where life happens anyway. right? So when we believe that, it gives us the freedom to approach the world that way.
Yeah.
That everyone has a story. Everyone's fighting a battle.
Yes.
There's something going on. And if it's like the given in the equation, then you assume that you solve for X. You know that you work with that. That's that is the connector. The human condition is that we're all fighting a battle.
Yeah, we all are. And
Yeah.
we all forget too that this is just temporary.
Yeah.
This doesn't go there
Yeah.
with us. And though we know that and we're told that and we say that, we don't really stop and comprehend that. I think it takes someone extremely close to you to have a loss, to understand that person was like me. They were in my life every day. I saw them all the time. And to have them be gone, then you realize there is somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So then if we stop, why are we pushing everybody down when this is just short term? Do we really come back to life and start back up where we left off?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So finding your purpose along with your career is such a blessing because we need to leave this world a better place than we found it. And right now, it disheartens me that we are not as humans. I think with this online media stuff, it has gotten even worse. And even with AI, you don't know what's real anymore. I feel really bad for anybody in the social media attention area of any celebrity. Like, I can't even imagine what that is like. You know, they create fake pictures and they look just like you, or they can even sound just like you. And everybody creates these own stories. I don't even know how people have time for this, but that is not acting for the betterment of this world. And everybody talks as if they're facts. Well, this, that, I'm like, do you even know them? Who are you to say? Why do we assume these things by human nature? Why do we push people down? What if we all just remembered we're team human? Like, don't you want to be on team human? Because your kids are going to live here one day. Your loved ones are going to live here one day. Why aren't we coming together and just, but instead we go by this piece of paper called money and give each other power or fame. And they don't always use it for the betterment, So much to think about.
I'm sitting here. You think your mind moves 1,000 miles an hour. You've got mine moving 1,000 miles. And I know everybody listening to this, their brain is exploding right now because you just asked about 15 pointed, intelligent, very difficult questions all in about 2 paragraphs. I mean, and to pull it apart, like there's a knot in the shoe.
Yeah.
We've got to start pulling it apart and looking at it. And I come back to something that you said again, kind of almost matter-of-factly. I've seen the home that you built on 10 acres and to go, okay.
Yeah.
Transition in life.
Yeah.
I'm going to start a different chapter.
Yeah.
And I'm going to invest in a whole different way. Insert, who the hell does this? You see what I mean? It's like, this is like putting your money where your mouth is. It's one thing, I suppose, to think it, but to actually say,
do it.
I'm doing something. Okay, here I'm going out to deep ocean with you, but this idea that with every passing minute, you can make a decision to change everything.
Yes.
That concept, it's also written on that board up there, that what you're doing right now needs to be recognized as this is your choice. Because if it's not an awareness around that, the dog is walking you. You're not walking the dog. Living deliberately says, I'm choosing. Well, you can make some choices. You could be on the other side of the world, sleeping on a dirt hut by Monday if you made a choice to do so. You could reinvent yourself. I am so inspired by that reality. I used to be going this way, then I stopped, and now I'm going this way.
Yep.
Who does that, though?
Yeah.
We get in this traffic flow of humanity that just it just moves like there just seems to be, there's no choice. It's what we do. Something happened and you went, no, I'm going to go a different direction.
Yeah.
You know, you think, oh, I've built this big business. I can't just like hit the pause button.
Right.
But you did.
Yeah.
I remember a meeting with you years and years ago, sitting there at Green Lake and going, so the company, no, it's on pause. I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I'm throwing myself into this. I talked to a guy who retired as being in the top upper management of Bank of America. He was on the cover of Fortune magazine, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And guess what he does now?
What?
He got a federal grant to bring pickleball into maximum security prisons. And that his whole life, he doesn't even get paid for it.
Right.
He is bringing pickleball with a federal grant that he wrote and got into maximum security prisons. He might be at San Quentin right now teaching death row people how to play pickleball. And you go,
What?
What? The guy used to run Bank of America and he's now teaching pickleball. And he told me on the phone a couple of weeks ago, Greg, I've never done anything so important and so fulfilling in my life.
Yeah.
And by the way, in about 2 months, he's going to be sitting right in that chair and you'll hear this story, just like Mike Mathis, who all of a sudden life hits him.
Yep.
And now instead of being the all-star jockstrap 12-year-old, recruited because he's such an athlete, now he's burned on 90% of his body fighting for his life. Mm-hmm. So sometimes life can say, hey, new program. Mm-hmm. To me, it's even more amazing when you just say, new program.
You know, one of my favorite books I've ever read was Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah.
And it's about these mice that are in a maze, and it's about like how to get out and who's stuck in their habits. You know, back in my banking days, it reminds me of when the debit card came out. But there's an ATM card, right? I had to physically, all day, from start to finish, my job was when there's the debit card that came out, I'd have to personally walk out to the machine just to show them, it's going to be okay. This is only change. But people were so afraid of change. Mm-hmm. People are so afraid of change, they can't get over their walls.
Right.
They're afraid of it.
Yeah.
It takes working on your own internal mind and your thoughts to get yourself out of that. Mm-hmm. And now I embrace change. Mm-hmm. Change usually can be such a blessing. But with the way the world moves so fast nowadays, you have to be able to go with it. Mm-hmm. If you can't go with the change, you're going to be stuck back here. Mm-hmm. So to make those kinds of changes in his life and to find his true purpose, he's probably just discovering his true purpose. Mm-hmm. And he's absolutely right. It is the absolute most fulfilling thing that you can do.
Yeah.
It's so rewarding, and I wish everybody could do it. I wish everybody could be a go-giver. I want everybody to go out there and just see what it's like, because you don't need drugs if you want that high. Mm-hmm. You will have a natural high that is so positive and encouraging that it could become even addicting. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's the best addiction that you can have.
Mm-hmm. Anny, I think that this message that you've delivered, not with words, but people just see it in your life, in your actions. This is who you are.
Yeah.
What are you up to? How are you doing it? How do you create this? How is it sustainable? You've figured out all of those pieces to everybody's naysay, everybody's doubt that you could actually live a life that way.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur. You're a get-it-done person. You're a capitalist. You know what I mean? You all those things kind of seem that, well, that is one kind of person. That's not this kind of person. But see, what you're doing is you're living all of this at the same time and showing that this is possible. Mm-hmm. It's what everybody hopes for, but few ever figure out.
I think combining the two can make greatness.
Yeah.
I think one was lacking the other.
Yeah.
To build an empire, to build a career and have success, you're missing the true purpose of what life is really about. Mm-hmm. And if you have a true purpose on what your life is about, unless you can turn that into a career, having the two can go really side by side. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I had to figure out. I think that's why I took a complete switch. Mm-hmm. And then I was able to kind of incorporate the two together, because now I live a life of so much more compassion, and my eyes are so much more wide open, that I live by these words: always do what's right. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people come to me all the time and say, well, what am I supposed to do in this situation? I don't know. What's right? Mm-hmm. Then do what's right. Even if it doesn't feel good for you and it's not beneficial for you, do the right thing. Mm-hmm. You got to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm able to take my lending and real estate, and I'm able to mentor in a positive way. Mm-hmm. And it's so fulfilling. And I'm able to do my acts of kindness, and I'm able to show compassion with my clients in a completely different way, because I wear my heart out here, and you're not going to be just a number to me. Mm-hmm. Anyone who I've ever helped becomes family. Anyone who's ever been on my show becomes family. And we become here for each other. But you got to live a life where you can find a way to incorporate the two together. Mm-hmm. Because when I was doing all my humanitarian work too, I did get really passionate about the homeless and all different kinds of charities. And my mom said, Anny, you have a heart of gold, and I know this means so much to you, but if you continue to give away everything you have to rebalance your life, you're not going to be able to help these homeless people if you become homeless yourself. Words of wisdom, it's true. Mm-hmm. So then you realize, it's okay to make a living too. Mm-hmm. Because if you can make a living and you can help, then it gives you the capability to help even more. You just got to remember where the focus is. The focus isn't to have this empire and be the most richest person in the world. I want to be the most richest person in the world in my heart. Mm-hmm. And I want to share that with other people.
Anny, that there's this intensive that I've taught many times called Power Players. And
yes.
there's an intake form. There's a screening process, right? Because the people ask me, like, what does it take to get in that group? What does it take to attend that seminar? It's like, do I need to have bought so much real estate or this or that? And no, the screening is, I want to get a feel for who you are and what is your motivation to want to do well in business. What is your motivation to want to, to be successful as a business person? I want to feel that. And because there's some motivations, if it's just money, it's not sustainable.
Right.
Once you've got a bunch of money, what happens?
Then what?
Right? Okay. And when you've had abundance in that way, you kind of go, well, all right, what's next? Mm-hmm. But I think more importantly, that if somebody in their heart wants to be an Anny, wants to be a giver, well, now they could have any amount of money in the world, and it won't change who they are. Matter of fact, what they have is they're going to have resources to do their giving in ways that maybe they couldn't. The contrast, though, is that if you're a taker, if you're an asshole, well, having a lot of money, you just become a bigger asshole.
Right.
And I'm telling you, you want to increase the assholeness fire, give an asshole a lot of money. And wow, Now
Yeah.
now it really gets glaring.
Now they got power and asshole.
Right. Yeah. So this idea of taking givers and wow, I want to help them be successful in business
Yes.
because what they do, it doesn't change who they are, but their awareness, their ability, they're able to solve things.
Yes.
They're able to get things done. They're the ones that you call on a lot of people to do a lot of things. And there's always those that graciously go, "Oh my God, Annie, I'd love to help with that." Yeah. I think maybe even one of the last times I saw you was at Randall Morris's golf tournament. And Randall, what an awesome human being, right?
Yes,
He's just
I
an
agree.
awesome human being.
He
You know
is.
what? People are like, oh, he's an NFL running back. Well, I think he's a giver that
He's a
happened to
huge
have
giver.
great athletic talent because
Yeah.
he's just a giver.
Yep.
Well, that guy could have $8 billion and all he would do is he'd be a giver.
Mm-hmm.
That's what his foundation is about. He wants to do good things with the gifts that God has given him.
Yeah.
And so, so funny that you're right in the center of anybody that's like that. I swear, I just think it's really awesome that you're drawing those like people that really make things happen.
I am so excited for you to meet Jeremy too, because he is the man version of me.
Wow.
Speak about a giver. I don't think I even rate on a scale compared to him.
Huh.
Even on our very first date, he showed up with a dozen roses, and not very many men do that anymore, especially on a first date when you've never even met. We met I think it was the first week COVID hit, and you had to wear face masks. It was so weird. And we got kicked out of a restaurant because everything just all of a sudden shut down. We're like, what's happening? But he had a dozen roses for me, and I remember I thought, this has got to be a red flag. I literally called some of my friends, you guys, and I said, you met this person. Like, is he really that nice? Are these meant for somebody else? Like, was he really bringing those for me? Like, is he that much of a giver? Like, I wasn't always used to that. But then he showed up on the 4th of July, and he had a bag of presents for my son that he had researched what he liked. He had, I think, 3 trips back and forth to the car just to bring stuff in that he brought. I mean, he thought of everything, but he was always like that. He would, when we first started dating, how there's like those little flower shops on the side of the road? And you'd go and you pick the local flowers.
Yeah.
He would buy the whole stand. And then the kitchen table would be the white buckets full of the flowers. And I'm like, well, what?
Hey, that saves having to arrange anything. Just buy the whole bucket.
But
right?
then I realized I found my person.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can find someone that's like an equal in your heart, it like can just explode. And I thought it was pretty solid where I was when I met him. I feel like my heart is like even expanded since meeting him, because you have that person that gets you. Because that was always a challenge for me in the dating world too. Like, how am I going to find someone that's going to understand all of this stuff I want to do? And I have passion and drive, and it's hard to calm my mind down. I'm the doer, and it's hard to have someone align with that.
I think that another thing, and I haven't met him, but I can guarantee you, he has to be a very, very unselfish, non-jealous person.
Yes.
Because he is sharing you with the world.
Yeah.
You can't go anywhere where people don't come up to you, and so I really he has to have that heart that
he does.
He's married to somebody like you, that he's giving right there because he's captivating you, your time, and this and that. The whole world's got their hand tugging on your shirt, and so I think I can't wait to meet him.
Yeah, I'm really excited for you to meet him because it's pretty cool to be aligned with someone in life that understands your purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at first people are like, oh, what are you going to give them that for? You don't need to bother them. You don't need to go help them. You don't. And now he's like, let's go do this. He's like, what else can we do? And he's just like a cheerleader for it. And it's so
I love
positive, He's so positive with it all. It's,
putting the essence of you in a parametered podcast is literally impossible. I've seen you in a, with a video of you in the Blue Angels jet. I've seen you at every grand opening and every business, celebration and every philanthropic celebration. And it's like, there you are up front again, doing your Anny thing. What I also am knowing that people are getting out of this because of your vulnerability, your transparency, is that you're just a normal person. And yet you're captivating decisions in your life that most people just they just go over. They don't really take seriously. You're pushing yourself to be the best version of yourself. You're making change. And to me, if I were to try to put a bow on this, Anny, it comes back to this idea that you alone get to choose what you do next. You can face it and run to the sound of the challenge, or you cannot. And you have always run to that sound. The more difficult thing, the more challenging thing, the more heart-drawing thing, against what it's counterintuitive, against what so many people would do. It's like, no, we've got it all going. It's all secure. Let's just keep building our business and all's good. And
I'm going to move that cheese.
But here you go. You're going to move the cheese.
You're going to
go. I got a new idea. How about I just go start over doing something completely different, spend my money on this, and then we'll go to the next chapter. Nobody does that, but they're inspired to do it.
Yeah.
How do you take somebody that you feel that they're stuck? They've got the handcuffs of life on them for whatever reason, whether it's a job they don't completely love, whether it's a relationship that's going nowhere, whether it's a contribution that isn't happening, someone that's not living their verse.
Yeah. What do I say to them?
Sit them down. What do you say to them, Anny?
Well, for one, I feel like every single person's so different. So I don't think there's like one answer to that. I ask them questions. That's what helps me understand. Before I ever speak, I like to ask questions to understand. Because otherwise then I'm just doing the same thing that I don't like when other people do. I just assume. So I try to figure out like, what is it that's holding them back? What are they afraid of? Where does that fear come from? What is stopping you? And then a lot of times I'm probably, knowing me, I'm going to say, well, what if I do this with you? What if we do it together? What if you don't have to feel alone? Sometimes that's what it takes, just someone believing in you. I noticed sometimes they just don't have that person that believes. So then that's when I come in and I want to be their cheerleader if it's truly something that they want. And so
we've got this.
We've got this. Yeah, I do that with a lot of my agents. I feel like they just were missing that. And I want to support them. I want them to achieve it. And I like to talk about goals too. Okay, so if this is something I want to do, what's your goal? Okay, let's just go baby steps then.
Right.
You don't have to have your goal be the finish line. Your goal can be just this week, and you can get there. Everybody has their own different pace.
Right.
We can walk it or we can run it.
Right.
But let's take the marathon.
I heard a great coach, a business coach once, phrase it this way. He said, I feel blessed that I've put myself in a position to allow and encourage people to borrow my confidence.
Yeah.
And I went,
oh, that's cool.
I kind of, I've coached a lot of people, at least I think I have, and I thought, I never thought of it that way. But then I thought about it, and I thought, God, how many times it's like, no, we're going on this. This is good. You may not see it the way I do, but believe me, we're not slowing down. We're going, and come on, we've got this. And then they go, and it works well, and they go, wow, okay, now I feel like I can do it on my own. I feel like I see it now. I've done it. But sometimes that vote of confidence, that
Yes.
someone to say, I know what you feel, but let's do it.
Yeah.
I've been there. Yeah.
And that fear, that fear is learned. So tapping into where did you get that fear from? Something I also learned is I didn't know that we were only born with two fears. The fear of falling and the fear of loud noise, and the rest is learned. So when someone has
Never heard
fear
that.
like me, like the fear of anxiety, like where does that come from? Trying to figure that out. Like if you have a fear that's holding you back, then we got to work on where the stem of that fear came from, because you were not born with that. Just so fascinating to me.
I have never heard that.
Yes, I've read
is really
read about it,
interesting.
and I learned it when I was working on my episode with Kind TV, and because it was fear factor, and so I started researching fear. Well, where does fear come from? Why do we have fear? Why are we so afraid? What is that? And I learned that. I read that a lot, and I thought that is so interesting, and it's just to protect you. Even as a baby, the fear of falling off something you could hurt, or a loud noise will be a jolt, but that's just for a safety, security probably, and the rest just comes from your environment.
Learned behavior.
Yeah, which is so.
Well, you referenced this earlier too in one of these little flybys, but the phrase I think you use is that I worked hard on myself.
Yeah,
God, there's a deep ocean thought. What the hell does that mean? But
Yeah.
it is scraping to the bottom of things. You think about the hard drive that gets installed in all of
Yeah.
us. It happens between 0 and 4 or 5. We don't even know it's happening. We're a product of the influences in the environment.
Yeah.
And here this hard drive is wired. Most adults never understand it, much less challenge it. I have this mantra that if we want to make extraordinary things happen in life, step 1 is question everything.
Yes.
Go back and look at your hard drive and go,
Yeah, question
right.
everything. That's what I do too.
question it, look at it. Is this serving me and the people I love most?
Yeah.
And if not, I've got to change this.
Right.
Understand thyself is that's a lot of work.
And start to think about too, like just how your mind process is too. We naturally assume the worst, but why is it the worst? Like why?
Yeah.
You got to stop yourself in your tracks.
Yeah.
For my training, sometimes I would just have to pick a word and just start saying it over and over and over, so I couldn't think of anything else. If my mind would get bad enough, I would even like turn on a movie, because you can't watch and listen and think at the same time. Like you can only do so much at the same time. So you have to find ways to trigger your mind to help you also live a happier life. And I don't even know if this is a real word, Greg, so don't make fun of me for this one, but they call it my Annyisms. I make up my own stuff. But I would always tell people, I choose to be innocently naive. And I say that because to me, what that means is I choose to separate and just not even know anything about it. I choose not to always watch the news. And maybe some people might think, well, then you're not going to be educated. You don't know. No, I'll just be naive about it, but it's innocent. And
Right.
it creates happiness in my own mind, just shutting that world down when I don't need all that blast.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
choose to look at the brighter side. I make a choice to not assume the worst. Well, what if they only meant this by it? Like, how do you know that's what they meant? Oh, no, they meant this. No.
Right.
And then I have this happiness that I create.
Your comment made me think of a quote from Henry Ford that when he was starting his company. The quote, I believe I'm accurate on this. He said, "I'm looking for a few people who don't know what can't be done."
Oh, yeah.
And essentially it's that there's nothing on your whiteboard yet.
Yeah.
It's wide open. You don't know, you don't have any preconceived notions of what can't be done. I'm just looking for people that have an open mind
Yeah.
and who aren't judging things.
Yeah.
And let's see what we can do. And I thought, wow, that creating that white space to create, it's almost like buying real estate. If there's a lot of equity there, there's a lot of
A lot of different
deal
things you can
structuring
do.
that you can do,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like with our mind, if there's an open mind.
Yeah.
A mind that isn't all bent with preconceived attitudes,
Right.
predispositions, etc. Okay, now the whiteboard is there to create what you want to create. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And yes, that's completely a word to Anny.
Yeah.
An Annyism. I like
an
that.
Annyism.
Yeah. That sounds better than Pinneo-isms. That's way too long. Yeah, right. This has been so fun. My consider challenge. Here it is. And I just hope that it hits the nail right on the head. And it is this notion of change. Consider change. Consider that you get to say what happens next.
Yeah.
And I see that theme just running and will continue to run through your life to the very, very end, that I'm going to run to the sound of change and recreate and reinvent and go to where my heart is saying to go next. What if, it's like, what would you do if you could just truly act next in accordance with your verse in life, your heart, your theme? What would you do? And you live it. So I want to know, the world to know, and you're going to tell them, because I know there's going to be a way, but I want the world to know how best to communicate with you in the avenues and the ways that you want that to happen, because they're going to listen to this and they're going to want to tell you something or ask you a question or connect with you in some way. Is there a way that can be done that doesn't completely, blow up your phone?
Yeah, definitely.
How does someone do that?
I think the best way is either my personal Facebook page or my personal Instagram page.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
And those are, but I try to bring all of me into the one. So I think it's under, it's either the Anny L. Johnson or Anny L. Johnson, which who would have thought there's another Anny Johnson, Anny with a Y? They're everywhere. I thought I knew Johnson was a common last name, but I'm like, no, I'm the Anny Johnson.
So Anny L.
Johnson.
Johnson.
So either on Facebook or Instagram is a really great way.
Okay.
I always respond to people. If it's not like immediately, I still read everything and I eventually will respond. But I love when people reach out and I love if people have questions. And like I said, what's most important to me in life is it's not just where my life goes. It's like, how can I help you and how can I influence you? Because I feel like the concept is we're better together. Mm-hmm. We are really, truly better together. Yeah. And so if there's a way that I can help them be better or they can help me be better, then I think everybody wins. Mm-hmm. So yeah, please reach out. I would love to answer anything.
And of course we've discussed it, and it's me doing this, not Anny, but it's just saying that, neighborhood mortgage, hey, I don't do endorsements. Yeah. But I believe in certain people. So
thank you.
In that you're behind that, your real estate ventures with EXP. This isn't an endorsement show, but it's a love affair with the greatest people I know. If you're sitting in that chair, it's because I think you are the shit. And
thanks.
I mean it in every way. And I want people to know you. I want my kids to know you. I want the world to know you, because they will be challenged for the better. Yeah. That's who sits in that chair. Yeah. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Ryan is going to make us lunch right now.
Yay! Food.
And thank you for being with us again on this podcast. I'm giving a hand with you to Miss Anny Johnson.
That's me, Miss
Anny. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching.
I appreciate it. We did it. We did it.